Hello, I'm Keith Hilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with another instrument review for you. And today I have the latest iteration of a perennial favorite in the large bore tenor trombone world, specifically the Edwards T396-AR. The Edwards line, of course, have been incredibly popular really since their inception in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's certainly something we've mentioned on the channel, but we haven't talked about a whole lot because up till this point, we really haven't had a lot of access to Edwards. We'd have them come through every so often. However, working with the great folks at Getson and Edwards, we have been able to bring a couple of their most popular models into the shop, including the 396 and their great 502i bass trombone here as well, which I'll hopefully talk about later. So the T396-AR, like I mentioned, is the latest iteration of the 396, which has been a go-to for so many great players for years now, really. And it looks back at some of the design innovations that Edwards has come up with over the years, and of course has incorporated some new ideas as well. So I'm really excited to play this for you so you can hear it, and I will of course talk about the experience afterwards. I'm going to be playing all of this on my trusty Bach 5G, and for those of you in the Edwards know, I'm going to be using their medium length stainless steel pillar here in the medium position facing upward. We know that Edwards has been such an important designer, developer, and go-to instrument for high-end, tenor, bass, alto trombones, everything for years and years now. Why? Because they have put so much work into the handcrafting and development of the instrument and have been, really able to work with some of the best designers and developers in the brass world to keep innovating their instruments and then combining it with all of the wonderful handworking that the Edwards instruments are known for. And so their new T396-AR is certainly no exception to that. So as I mentioned, this is the latest iteration of the 396 line. From its previous iteration, they've made a few tweaks. They've kept some of the stuff the same, but they've made a lot of little changes too that have really changed a little bit how this instrument plays from, for example, the 396A. So, all the way through, like all the 396s, this has a 8.5-inch yellow brass bell unsoldered rim on it here. We have a seamed gold brass tuning slide here. So that's one of the things that they feature on this model is versus the typical drawn tuning slide. They, along with a few other makers, for example, S.C. Shires, have done work with seamed tuning slides here. So a single piece of sheet metal that is taken and rolled over and seamed and then bent. And what that does is it gives you a different kind of consistency and thus resonance within the material versus a drawn tuning slide where there can be subtle changes in the overall thickness of the tubing material, which of course can change the resonance. That of course is combined with the design from the previous 396 with the gold brass outer tubes, yellow brass crook, kind of semi-wide hand side here. Of course, this is a 547 bore, fixed lead pipe, and this has their brand new AR rotor. So they advertised this rotor as being the most open, the most balanced rotor out there. Anything like that, I would kind of leave up to the beholder, so to speak, there, but there certainly is some really nice stuff happening with that. And then, of course, this has the classic Edwards harmonic bracer, so the scalloped harmonic brace. Just a quick talk through for those of you who are not familiar with this concept. The harmonic brace idea from Edwards is the idea of identifying those nodal points within the instrument that really affect how the instrument resonates. And the idea here is by creating this harmonic bridge here, this kind of stabilizing point, and then using different weights of materials, whether they're different weights or different hardnesses of materials and different combinations, you're really able to go through and fine-tune the sound, the response, the stability, the articulation, the timbre distribution, all of this depending on your approach, your own needs, and what you are looking for here. And as an aside, it's an amazing thing how small these little bits of material are. They send these along with different lengths of steel and copper, and it's amazing. It really does make a difference. That's a whole nother video talking about that. But we do have the harmonic pillar on there as well. A couple other nice features. Of course, they've done a really nice job with the thumb paddle here. Going to, kind of a nice laminate material, very comfortable on here, and some really nice Art Deco engraving on here as well. And Getson actually has been doing some of this lately as well, and I think it really goes back to kind of the history of the Getson brand and the Getson family and looking backward at a lot of that. So I think that's very, very pretty as well. Now, of course, the important thing is how does it play? One of the things I talked about with the 396A is that I felt like it was a very, very unique instrument. It took a real certain air approach to it. And I think it was something I described. It was a very, very efficient instrument. I almost felt in a way like I had to approach it like I do alto trombone. You really had to slow down the airflow in that case versus, instead of alto with the 396A, I felt I had to use this really big, broad supported airflow. But you had to keep it at a certain size and a certain speed, and if you started to try to push beyond that, it would really, really back up on you. It would not respond at all. A little bit actually kind of like some of the classic German tenor and bass trombones as well, a certain air approach. And so what I found that with the 396AR, it has, certainly a lot of attributes of the 396A, but it feels a little more accessible. It doesn't feel like I have to be as thoughtful with my airflow, although I do to a point. Now, again, everybody's got their own approaches. I've talked about this before. I tend to fall a little bit more into the Bach camp. I was originally a Con 88H player, and so I think that's still part of me, which means my mindset is kind of innately a little bit more focused, a little bit faster airflow, and over time I've learned how to change that and shape that depending on the instrument. What I found with the 396-AR is that I could think a little bit more naturally with it, but I still had to be conscious of especially the airspeed. I felt like there was a little bit of a tipping point where, if I started hitting the gas a little bit too fast, it wouldn't back up on me. It would still respond, but all of a sudden the timbre would really shift, and it would get quite a bit brighter, and I felt like if I pushed that airspeed too much, if I kind of went over the top, it wouldn't slot quite the same way. And that's actually one of the things I really liked about the 396-AR. I felt like it was incredibly stable. They talk about the intonation with this model. I think they've got a lot of that right. It is very, very in tune, which means for me that where the partials, where everything is locking in is very, very stable. As soon as I hit a pitch, it's where I expect it to be, meaning that I'm really comfortable with how it locks in place. I think that does that wonderfully well. I think access through the ranges going up above the eighth partial. I think very, very stable. Very nice sound. And not a whole lot of shifting in timbre as well. I thought that the timbre stayed fairly consistent through there as well. Occasionally in the lower register on the trigger range, it would get a little bit bright, a little bit edgy. But that happens on a lot of horns for us in that pedal register depending on our approach. So I don't think that's necessarily a negative with it at all. And again, I really love the weight, the core of the sound, but it still had character to it. It didn't feel dead to me, where some models can do that, where you just feel like there's not a lot of life to it, there's not a lot of resonance. This definitely had resonance, and it felt like I could dance with it a little bit on one of the excerpts I played, where I'm trying to do some different articulations, whether something a little bit more staccato or something just a little bit more separated, a little more marcato. It followed me, and I felt like I had really good control, and I felt like there was certainly flexibility moving between the registers. But like I said, I mean, there is certainly a character, and the stability is wonderful. To a point, though, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to shift the timbre. And again, that's a very, very personal thing. Some players really like to know that this sound is going to have a sound that I can trust, and I know it's going to do the same thing. It's not going to shift a whole lot on me. Whether I'm playing, whether I'm playing Brahms 4, or if I'm playing Heldenleben, or anything in between, I'm going to be able to really be able to rely on what's going to do and count on it. There's a lot of power to that. There are other folks who say, I want the ability, if I can control it, if I want it, I want to be able to shift the timbre. I want to be able to color things a little bit more. This may not do that. I think it does do it easier for me anyway than the 396A did. I feel like I have a little more control. It's not crazy. I feel like I'd have to work a lot to get the color to shift. Not necessarily a bad thing. I think, again, it's what you are looking for here. And then, of course, I didn't even talk about just the beauty of the construction. And, anything coming from Edwards is always, it's beautifully built all the way through. The slide was fantastic. The valve feels awesome, all of that. So we've got all of those characters coming with it. So a really great successor in the 396 line. And, of course, always excited to see what Edwards comes up with next. So if you have any thoughts about what I talked about, what you heard in the video, please leave them in the comments. If you haven't already done so, consider about subscribing to our channel, giving this video a thumbs up, hitting that notification button, so that way you can be a part of our community here, sharing information. I love that community aspect of the channel and would encourage you to be a part of it. And of course, you can always find the Trombone Shop on Facebook and Instagram. So again, thank you for watching.